Adese Okonkwo is 6 months pregnant, standing on the balcony of her 8th-floor apartment, watching the skyline glow. Her hands rest on her stomach. She is thinking about how lucky she is. She hears the balcony door slide open behind her. She turns around smiling, expecting her husband. He is there. But he is not alone. Standing beside him, close, comfortable, in a way that wives recognize before their minds are ready to name it, is a woman Adese has never seen before. Young. Unbothered. Watching Adese with the flat, patient expression of someone who has been waiting a very long time for this moment. Adese looks from the woman to Bayo. Bayo looks back at her. And that is the thing that breaks the last illusion. His face is not guilty. Not caught. Not sorry. Calm. The calm of a man who has already made his decision and is simply now executing it. She opens her mouth. He takes one step forward. Her back hits the railing. And then there is nothing beneath her feet. The Lagos night rushes past her. 8 floors of air. And a car she never saw coming. Hello guys. Welcome to African Tales by Amarachi. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, share it with your friends, and most importantly turn on the notification bell so you can get informed when I drop another amazing story. Drop your thoughts and reactions in the comments. When Adese turned around and saw her husband standing there with another woman on Christmas Eve, what would you have done in that moment? Let's dive. Her name is Adese Okonkwo, 31 years old, Lagos-born, the only daughter of the late Chief Emeka Okonkwo, whose real estate empire had made her one of the wealthiest women under 40 in Nigeria without her having to lift a finger toward cruelty or compromise to earn a single kobo of it. Adese is not naive. She is educated, sharp, professionally accomplished in her own right as a corporate attorney, and surrounded by people who love her enough to be honest with her. Her father had raised her to understand money, not to worship it, but to respect it, to know its weight, to recognize the specific way it changes the temperature of a room when people know you have it. She had grown up watching men smile at her father in a way that had nothing to do with her father, and everything to do with what her father owned. She had filed that observation carefully and carried it into her adult life as a working instinct. She had turned down 3 proposals before Bayo because something in each of those men had felt like a calculation dressed as a feeling. The first had been too eager, too quickly in love, too publicly devoted, the kind of man who performed affection in front of audiences and was quieter about it in private. The second had been her mother's choice, not hers. A good man from a good family with good prospects and eyes that never quite focused on her face when she spoke. The third had been closer. She had liked him genuinely, but she had caught him once going through her desk, and when she had asked him what he was looking for he had smiled and said nothing, and she had understood from the smile and the nothing that she had learned what she needed to learn. Bayo felt different. That was the point. That was always the point. He is 34. Handsome in the particular way that makes women lower their guard before they understand why. Broad shoulders, easy laugh, the kind of man who remembers the small things. The name of your mother's favorite fabric. The way you take your tea. The date of the appointment you mentioned once in passing 3 weeks ago. He is attentive in a way that feels like devotion and is, in fact, research. Bayo had identified Adese 2 years before he introduced himself at a Lagos business function. He had studied her habits, her preferences, the specific type of man her previous relationships had made her distrust, and the specific type of man those same relationships had made her hope for. He had built himself into that hope deliberately, the way a contractor reads a blueprint before laying a single brick. He knew she distrusted men who were too eager, so he was measured. He knew she valued honesty, so he was careful to be honest about small things. He knew she had been overlooked in past relationships, so he made her feel seen, completely, consistently, convincingly seen. It was a masterclass in patient deception. He gave it 14 months. He proposed after 14 months. He chose the rooftop of a restaurant in Ikoyi she had mentioned once, only once, as one of her favorite views in Lagos. He had the ring she would have chosen if she had chosen it herself because he had spent 3 weeks quietly learning her taste in jewelry from her closest friend Ngozi, who believed she was helping with a surprise and was, in fact, being used as a research instrument. He proposed in front of no one, just the two of them and the Lagos skyline, because he had correctly identified that Adiz was not a woman who wanted her private emotions turned into a spectacle. She said yes and cried the kind of tears that come from relief, from the feeling that something you were afraid of wanting has finally arrived. She called her mother from the rooftop before they even left. Her mother cried too. What she did not know, standing in that moment with the ring on her finger and Lagos stretched out below her, was that Bayo had a phone in the glove compartment of his car with a contact saved under a false name. A woman named Remy Savage, 26 years old, the woman he had been with for 4 years before Adiz, and the woman he intends to return to once the estate is his. Remy knows everything. Remy helped plan everything. She is not a passive participant in what is being built. She is the architect alongside him, the one who had sat across from Bayo in a hotel room in Acadia 18 months earlier and said, "This is how you do it. You get close. You get married. You make sure there is a child because a dead wife with a child reads cleaner than a dead wife without one. Then you wait." She had said all of this with the flat practicality of someone discussing a business plan, and Bayo had listened and nodded and understood that this woman, who had nothing, was willing to help him take everything from a woman who had it all. They had been patient for 2 years. By Christmas they are done being patient. The wedding had been 8 months earlier, a 3-day celebration in Lagos that filled the pages of society magazines and confirmed, to everyone who attended, that Adiz Okonkwo had found exactly the man she deserved. Her mother had danced. Her late father's friends had raised glasses. Ngozi had given a speech that made the room laugh and then cry. Bayo had stood beside Adiz through all of it looking like a man who had won the most important thing in his life. In a sense, he had. Just not the thing anyone in that room understood him to mean. Adiz is 6 months pregnant on Christmas Eve. They had announced the pregnancy 3 months ago to the same circle of joy, her mother beside herself with anticipation, Ngozi already researching the best pediatricians in Lagos. Adiz had spent the last 3 months arranging the nursery with the focused happiness of a woman who has decided that this chapter of her life is exactly right. She is standing on the balcony of their 8th-floor apartment in Victoria Island on Christmas Eve, watching the Lagos skyline light up. Her hands rest on her stomach. The city below is loud with celebration. Music from a neighbor's apartment, the distant sound of church bells beginning their midnight sequence early, the kind of joyful noise that Lagos makes when it decides to be beautiful. She is thinking about how lucky she is. She is thinking about names. She is thinking about next Christmas, when there will be a child in this house, and what that will feel like. She hears the balcony door slide open behind her. She turns around smiling, expecting her husband. He is there. But he is not alone. Standing beside him, close, comfortable, in a way that wives recognize before their minds are ready to name it, is a woman Adiz has never seen before. Young. Unbothered. Looking at Adiz with the flat, patient expression of someone who has been waiting a long time for this moment and is not surprised it has arrived. She is wearing all black, long-sleeve top, fitted trousers, flat shoes, the color of someone who dressed for an occasion they knew was coming. Adiz looks from the woman to Bayo. Bayo looks back at her. And that is the thing that breaks the last illusion. Because his face is calm. Not guilty. Not caught. Not sorry. Calm in the way of a man who has already done the difficult work of making his decision and is simply now executing it. The easy laugh is gone. The careful attentiveness is gone. What is left underneath all of it, finally visible, is something she has never seen before. Something cold, flat, and entirely focused. His eyes hold hers for 1 full second, and in that second Adiz understands everything. The courtship. The proposal on the rooftop she had mentioned only once. The ring chosen too perfectly. The 14 months of being seen in a way that had always felt, somewhere below her awareness, slightly too accurate. She understands the proposal and the wedding and the pregnancy. Understands them in their true shape, as stages in a plan, as steps in a timeline that ends on a balcony on Christmas Eve with this woman standing beside her husband, and no one in the building expecting to hear anything unusual over the sound of the city celebrating. She opens her mouth. He takes 1 step forward. Her back hits the railing. And then there is nothing beneath her feet, and the Lagos night is rushing past her, and 8 floors of air stand between her and the ground, and the last thing she sees before the darkness takes her is the Christmas lights of Victoria Island, beautiful and indifferent, shining on without her. She lands on a car. She does not know it yet. She does not know anything yet. But she is still breathing. The car is a midnight blue Bentley Bentayga parked directly below the building on Ozumbambaju Avenue, the kind of vehicle that announces its owner before he steps out of it, belonging to a man named Toby Ease, 43 years old, one of the most quietly powerful men in Lagos, founder of Ease Capital Group, a man whose name appears in the business pages with the regularity of someone who has stopped needing to seek attention and whose attention is now sought instead. Toby had been attending a Christmas Eve dinner on the 6th floor of the same building, a client's private gathering, the kind of evening he attended when declining would cost more than going. He had left early. He always left early from things like this. He has the particular intolerance of a man who has built something real for evenings that produce nothing. He was walking to his car when the sound hit. Not a scream, not a crash exactly, more like the world rearranging itself very suddenly. And then Adiz was on the roof of his Bentley. The impact is catastrophic for the car. For Adiz, it is something that should have been unsurvivable and is not, because of the angle of the fall, the canvas roof of the Bentley absorbing a portion of the impact, and something that the trauma surgeons at Eco Hospital would later describe in their notes as an extraordinary combination of physical resilience and circumstance. The roof had given. The structure had taken enough of the force that reached her body, while devastating, was not the full 8-story measure of it. She is alive. Barely. But alive. Toby Ease is the first person to reach her. He has his phone to his ear calling emergency services before his driver has fully processed what happened. He crouches beside the car, not climbing up, not moving her, understanding instinctively that movement could finish what the fall had started. And he stays there, keeping his hand close to hers without touching, talking to her in a low, steady voice. He switches to Igbo without thinking about it, because she had made a sound before losing consciousness. One word, barely a word, more like the shape of a word, and the shape had been her mother's name in Igbo, and he had recognized it, and he had understood from that one sound that something in her was still present and needed to hear something familiar. He talks to her in Igbo until the ambulance arrives. He does not know what he is saying exactly. He is saying, "I am here. You are not alone. Stay." He says it in different configurations until the paramedics push him gently to the side. He follows the ambulance to Eco Hospital. He tells himself he is following because he is a witness and will need to give a statement. This is true, but it is not the whole truth. The whole truth is that he had watched a pregnant woman fall from a building onto his car on Christmas Eve, and something in him has made a decision that has nothing to do with obligation and everything to do with the specific human instinct that activates when someone vulnerable lands in your path and you understand without deliberation that you are now involved whether you chose to be or not. He sits in the waiting room and he waits. Upstairs in the 8th floor apartment, Bayo has already called his lawyer. The call lasted 4 minutes. Then he called Remy, who had walked down the stairwell and left the building before the first neighbor opened their door to look. Remy is calm on the phone. She asks only one question: "Is it done?" And when Bayo says yes, she says nothing further and ends the call. Then Bayo composed himself into the expression of a devastated husband, went to the bathroom and splashed water on his face to redden his eyes, and called the building security to report that his wife had accidentally fallen from the balcony. He used the word accidentally twice. He was crying when the police arrived 11 minutes later. Not the crying of a man who has lost something, but the crying of a man who has rehearsed for this moment and is delivering the performance on schedule. He answers the officer's questions with the specific combination of cooperation and devastation that reads as authenticity. He asks about his wife. He asks about the baby. He holds his head in both hands when an officer tells him she has been taken to Eco Hospital and the situation is serious. He agrees immediately to accompany them to the station to give a full statement after he has checked on his wife at the hospital. A detail that makes him look like a husband first and establishes the right narrative before any questions become uncomfortable. The police report filed that night lists it as an accidental fall pending investigation. Pending investigation is the part Bayo is counting on. He goes to the hospital. He sits in the waiting room. He performs grief with the same thoroughness he performed love for 14 months. Completely, without visible seams, every gesture in the right place. What he does not know is that a man in a charcoal gray suit is sitting 20 feet away from him in that same waiting room, watching his face with the quiet, precise attention of someone who has spent 2 decades in business reading people across tables and boardrooms and negotiations where the stakes were high enough that reading people incorrectly had real consequences. Toby Ease sits in that waiting room and watches Bayo cry and feels something cold and specific settle in his chest. The grief is technically correct. All the right sounds, all the right gestures, the head in the hands, the shaking shoulders. But there is something underneath it that is too still. Toby has seen real grief. Real grief is chaotic. It makes people stand up and sit back down without knowing why. It makes them ask the same question 4 times because the answer is not landing. It makes them forget they are holding their phone until it falls from their hand. It is fundamentally disorganized because it is a collision with something the body was not prepared for. Bayo's grief is organized. The gestures arrive in the right order. The sounds are appropriately timed. It is a very good performance. But Toby has been in rooms with performers for 20 years and he knows the specific quality of a silence that exists behind a performance. The silence of a person who is managing, who is monitoring, who is checking whether the audience is watching. He says nothing. He takes out his phone and types a note to himself. He waits. Adiz survives the night. The baby survives. The doctors call it a miracle and mean it in the full clinical sense of the word. The collision of variables that should have produced a fatality and does not. She wakes on Christmas morning with 3 broken ribs, a fractured pelvis, a collapsed lung that has been reinflated overnight, lacerations across her left arm and shoulder, and the slow, terrible return of memory arriving in pieces. The skyline. The balcony door sliding open. Turning around smiling. The woman in black standing beside her husband. Bayo's face. Not guilty, not caught. Just decided. The railing at her back. The air. She lies in the hospital bed and lets the pieces assemble themselves, and when they are assembled she understands everything completely, and the understanding is not shock. It is something worse than shock. It is the specific, devastating clarity of a woman who has realized that the thing she most feared, being wrong about someone she loved, was not her fear failing her but her fear being precisely correct. The first thing she says when she can form words is, "Where is my husband?" The second thing she says, 3 minutes later, is, "He pushed me. He pushed me," and his woman was standing right there watching. Nobody in that room moves for a full 3 seconds. Then Toby Ease, who has come back to the hospital that morning because he has not been able to stop thinking about the words she said on the pavement, stands up from the chair in the corner of the room where he has been sitting quietly since 7 in the morning, and says, "I heard that. I am a witness to what she just said. And I need someone to get me the name of the best lawyer connected to this hospital right now." The nurse at the door looks at him. He looks back at her with the specific calm of a man who is not asking. She goes to make a call. Subscribe to African Tales by Amarachi right now and hit that bell. This story is only getting started and you do not want to miss a single chapter. Toby Ease does not insert himself into Adiz's situation out of romance. He is not a man who makes decisions from sentiment. He respects sentiment, he understands its value, but he does not let it drive him. He inserts himself because he watched a pregnant woman fall 8 stories onto his car, and the husband performed grief in a hospital waiting room with the specific organized quality of someone running a script, and Toby Ease had not built a 2 billion naira capital group by ignoring the precise, physical feeling that something is deeply wrong. He hires a private investigator within 48 hours. He uses a firm he has used before, not for anything like this, for due diligence on acquisitions, on potential partners, on the kind of background verification that responsible business requires. He calls the firm's director on the morning of the 26th of December and says, "I need everything you can find on a man named Bayo Adi Inca in the shortest time you can find it." He does not explain further. The director does not ask him to. He also does something else. He goes back to the building on Ozumbambaju Avenue and he asks the building management, politely and with the specific authority of a man whose name they recognize, for access to their CCTV system. The building manager is cooperative, This is a man whose car was destroyed on their premises and who has not yet made any noise about it. The building manager shows Toby to the security office, and Toby sits down and reviews the footage himself, starting from 2 hours before the fall. He finds what he is looking for in the external camera covering the car park. The 8th floor balcony is visible in the upper left corner of the frame. The footage is dark and the resolution is standard, not forensic quality but sufficient. He watches it 3 times. The first time he watches to see what is there. The second time he watches to be certain of what he saw. The third time he pulls out his phone and records the screen. He does not touch the original footage. He asks the building manager to preserve the full original files and not to provide copies to anyone without a formal police or legal request. The manager agrees, looking slightly alarmed, and Toby thanks him and leaves. The investigator's findings arrive 10 days later in a report that the investigator delivers in person because he has assessed the contents and decided they are not the kind of thing to send by email. Remy Savage. 4 years of relationship with Bayo predating his introduction to Adiz, documented through social media records, hotel bookings under Bayo's corporate account, and statements from 2 individuals in Bayo's former social circle who had known about Remy and had assumed the relationship ended when the engagement was announced. It had not ended. It had been paused. A shared bank account in Accra, Ghana, opened 11 months before the wedding, into which Bayo had been making regular transfers from a personal account that did not appear in any of the financial disclosures he had made to Adiz during their marriage. The account balance at the time of the investigator's report represents a significant accumulation. 2 years of systematic transfers, building towards something. Text messages. Recovered from a cloud backup associated with a phone number registered to Bayo. He had changed his physical handset twice in the past year, but had not changed the cloud credentials the backup was uploading to. The messages span 14 months. They are detailed. They are specific. They document a plan with the kind of granular clarity that removes all room for interpretation. There is a message from Remy dated 11 months before Christmas that reads, "How much longer?" There is Bayo's reply the following day. "After the baby is born it looks cleaner. Grief plays better with a newborn." There is a message from Remy 2 weeks later that reads, "I need to know this is actually happening." There is Bayo's reply, "It is happening. Stop asking." There is a message from 3 days before Christmas that reads, "Christmas Eve night. Building is quiet for the holiday. Make sure you are not seen leaving." The investigator sets the report on the table between them and says nothing, because there is nothing useful to add. Toby sits with it for 1 hour. He reads every page. He reads the text messages twice. Then he calls his attorney, a man named Mr. Okafor who has been his legal counsel for 11 years, and Mr. Okafor calls the Assistant Inspector General of Police for Lagos State, who is a person Mr. Okafor has worked alongside in a professional capacity for 8 years. And the AIG calls the lead detective on the Adiz Okonkwo case, and the detective who had filed the report as accidental fall pending investigation reopens the file before the end of the business day with a significantly different understanding of what he is investigating. Toby goes to the hospital. Adiz has been moved out of the ICU. She is in a private room, propped against pillows, the pelvis fracture still keeping her immobilized. The baby's heartbeat monitored continuously on a machine beside the bed that fills the room with a steady, reassuring sound. Her mother sits in the chair to her left. Deep dark brown skin, short silver-gray natural afro, navy blue Ankara blouse, hands pressed together on her lap, rosary between her fingers, praying in a continuous low murmur that she has not stopped since the night of the 24th. Ngozi occupies the chair in the corner with a medical journal open on her lap that she has not been reading. Her real attention divided between Adiz's face and the monitoring equipment. Toby introduces himself properly. He tells Adiz his name, that it is his car she landed on, that he was at the hospital that night and came back because he could not stop thinking about what he had heard in this room on Christmas morning. He tells her what he has done, the investigator, the CCTV, the conversation with Mr. Okafor, the reopened case. He tells it plainly, in order, without dramatizing any of it, because he has learned over 43 years that people in serious situations are better served by accurate information delivered clearly than by any version of protection from the truth. He slides the folder onto the table beside her bed and says, "You do not have to read this today. But you should know it exists and that it is already with the police and that the case has been formally reopened." Adiz looks at the folder for a long time without touching it. She looks at Toby. She says, "Why are you doing this? You do not know me. This is not your problem." He is quiet for a moment. Then he says, "You said your mother's name when you were lying on the pavement. I do not know why that is the thing that stayed with me. But it did." She looks at him for a long time after that. Then she opens the folder. She reads everything. Slowly, without expression, without interruption. Her mother's praying gets quieter and then stops entirely as the older woman watches her daughter's face. Ngozi sets the journal down. The room holds itself very still around Adiz as she reads. She reaches the last message. Christmas Eve night. Building is quiet for the holiday. Make sure you are not seen leaving. She closes the folder. She sets her hand flat on it. She is quiet for a long moment. Then she says, "I want the best criminal attorney in Nigeria in this room by Monday morning." Toby says, "I have already made the call. Her name is Amara. She will be here Saturday." Adiz nods once. She looks at the monitoring machine. She listens to the steady sound of her baby's heartbeat filling the room. Then she looks back at Toby and says, "Thank you." He nods. He does not say it is nothing, because it is not nothing, and he respects her enough not to perform modesty. Bayo is arrested on a Friday morning, 17 days after Christmas, at the apartment in Victoria Island. The same apartment, the same building, the balcony visible from the living room through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Officers from the Lagos State Criminal Investigation Department arrive at 7:45 in the morning with a warrant and the specific, unhurried energy of people who have everything they need and are not rushing because the subject has nowhere useful to go. He is in the living room when they come in, seated, dressed, as though he has been expecting them or could not sleep or both. He looks up when the door opens. He says nothing for a long moment. Then he asks for his lawyer. He says it with the composure of someone who has been running a version of this scenario in his head for 17 days, and is now simply in it. It is the last intelligent thing he does in this chapter of his life. Remy Savage is picked up the same morning at an apartment on the mainland. An apartment registered under a company name that took the investigators 4 days to trace back to Bayo. An apartment he had been paying for since 14 months before he introduced himself to Adiz at the Lagos business function. The timing of that detail, when it surfaces in court, will do considerable damage. Remy is not calm about the arrest. She is not composed. She says a number of things in the police vehicle that her own attorney would spend the first week of the case trying to have excluded from the record and would mostly fail. The case that Amara builds over the following 4 months is the kind of case that becomes a reference point in Nigerian criminal law. Amara is 61 years old, 33 years at the bar, the kind of lawyer that other lawyers describe with a specific respect reserved for people who have spent decades being right in rooms where being right required courage. She assembles the case with the same methodical intensity she has brought to every significant prosecution of her career. No flourishes, no theater, just evidence and the unshakable logic of someone who has built something that will not fall down. The foundation is the digital evidence. The cloud-recovered text messages, authenticated through forensic analysis of the server metadata, establish the plan with a specificity that no alternative explanation can accommodate. The messages are not ambiguous. They do not require interpretation. They say what they say, and what they say is that Bayo Adiyinka and Remy Savage spent 14 months planning the murder of a pregnant woman for her inheritance. The financial records from the Accra account, subpoenaed through international banking cooperation channels that took Mr. Okafor 6 weeks to navigate, show a consistent pattern of transfers that began 8 months before the wedding and continued up to 2 weeks before Christmas. The compliance officer from the Accra bank testifies in person, flying in from Ghana at the court's request, and his testimony establishes the account, the deposits, and the withdrawal pattern in language that the defense cannot meaningfully contest. 3 people from Bayo's social circle testify. A former colleague who had met Remy at a private gathering 2 years before the wedding and had been told she was Bayo's girlfriend. A mutual friend who had noticed, at Bayo and Adi's wedding, that Bayo received a text message during the reception that made him step outside for 8 minutes and return with a different quality of composure than he had left with. A building staff member who had seen a woman matching Remy's description entering the building through the car park entrance on the evening of the 24th, not through the main lobby. And then there is the CCTV. The enhanced footage from the building's external camera takes 3 weeks to prepare. The digital forensics firm works from the original uncompressed file, not the copy the building management had initially provided, and the enhancement brings the 8th floor balcony into a resolution that changes the nature of the case. What it shows, in 11 seconds, is unambiguous. 2 figures on the balcony. One standing at the railing, her posture and the visible outline of her pregnancy identifying her. A second figure moving toward her with deliberate, unhurried purpose. And then one figure. And the railing empty. Amara plays the footage on the 3rd day of trial. She plays it once at normal speed. Then she plays it again, frame by frame, at a quarter the speed, and she stands beside the screen without speaking while the courtroom watches the second figure take 4 steps toward the first with a steady, decided pace of someone who has made up their mind. The courtroom is silent in a way that courtrooms very rarely achieve. Not the silence of boredom or procedure, but the silence of a room full of people watching something that removes all uncertainty from their thinking. Bayo's defense has 3 arguments. The digital evidence was obtained through irregular means. Amara establishes the chain of custody without a gap, from the cloud server to the forensic analyst to the court exhibit. The financial records are claimed to represent a legitimate savings arrangement. Amara calls the bank's compliance officer and the cross-examination takes 40 minutes and ends with the defense counsel sitting down. The CCTV enhancement is challenged as technically unreliable. Amara calls 2 independent forensic experts who had not communicated with each other before the courtroom and who agree, in separate testimony, on every relevant technical point. Remy Savage's attorney makes a decision on the 4th day of trial. He has watched Amara work for 3 days, and he has assessed the landscape with the honest eye of a professional who understands when a position is untenable. He approaches the prosecution with a plea arrangement. Remy will testify fully and cooperatively in exchange for a reduced charge. Remy takes the stand on the 5th day. She confirms the relationship with Bayo. She confirms the Accra account. She confirms the plan, when it was conceived, how it developed, what each of them contributed to it. She confirms the text messages as authentic. She confirms that she was in the apartment on Christmas Eve. She confirms that she was standing on the balcony. She confirms that she watched Bayo push Adiz over the railing, and she confirms that she walked down the stairwell and left the building and called no one and said nothing. The courtroom receives this testimony in a silence that is not empty. It is the silence of people processing a level of cold that they had perhaps understood intellectually from the evidence, but are now hearing confirmed in plain language from a woman who was present. Adiz sits in the courtroom for every day of the trial. She is 6 weeks out of the final surgery on her pelvis, walking with a cane, dressed each day in a fitted black blazer over a white blouse and black trousers, the same combination every day, as though she has decided that this appearance before this court requires consistency, and she will give it that. Her daughter is at home with her mother in Ngozi taking alternating 12-hour shifts, small and fierce and gaining weight steadily after the early birth. She does not cry in the courtroom. She has done her crying privately, in hospital rooms in the dark, in the specific solitude of nights when the ward was quiet and there was nothing between her and the full weight of what had been done to her. She had cried for the marriage she had believed in. She had cried for the 14 months of being carefully deceived by someone she trusted. She had cried for the 4-year-old girl she had been, sitting on her father's shoulders, being told by a man who loved her completely that she was worth everything, and for the distance between that and a balcony on Christmas Eve. She had cried until the grief was fully felt and fully known, and then she had set it down and picked up something else. What she carries into the courtroom each morning is not hatred. It is something colder and more purposeful. The desire not for Bayo's suffering but for his accounting. For the record to say, clearly and in permanent language, what he did and what it cost. She wants justice, not revenge. She has been precise about this distinction from the beginning, and she holds it carefully throughout. On the last day before the verdict, Toby comes to the courtroom and sits in the gallery beside Adi's mother, who greets him now with the warmth of someone who has recategorized a person over time from stranger to something she does not yet have a word for but knows is trustworthy. Adi sees him from across the room. She nods once. He nods back. That is enough. If this story is moving you the way we hoped it would, subscribe to African Tales by Amarachi, share this with someone who needs to see justice done, and stay with us for the final chapter. You do not want to miss how this ends. The verdict comes on a Tuesday. The courtroom is full. Word of the case had spread through Lagos in the way significant cases spread. Through the business community first, because Adi's name was known there, and then outward through the city's networks until the gallery on verdict day holds people who had never met her and had followed the case because it had become, in the way of cases that crystallize something larger, a story about more than two people. It has become a story about what it costs a woman to be wealthy and trusting in a world where both of those things can be turned into weapons against her. Justice Boma takes her seat with the unhurried precision of someone who has been delivering verdicts for 22 years and understands that the weight of this moment belongs to the room, not to her, and that her job is to be the instrument through which the law speaks, not to perform its gravity. She reads the verdict. Bayo Adiyinka. Guilty on the first count of attempted murder. Guilty on the second count of conspiracy to commit murder. The courtroom absorbs each word in the specific way of a room that has been waiting for them. Not with noise, not immediately, but with the collective exhale of people who have been holding something for 4 months and are now allowed to set it down. Justice Boma delivers the sentence without elaboration. She has reviewed every piece of evidence. She has read every submission. She has assessed the premeditation, the 14 months of deliberate courtship, the financial preparation, the choice of Christmas Eve, the presence of the co-conspirator on the balcony. She has noted that Adiz Okonkwo was 6 months pregnant at the time of the assault and that the child survived only through circumstance and not through any consideration extended by the perpetrator. 25 years. No parole eligibility for the first 15. Remy Savage, her cooperation factored into the reduced charge and the prosecution's recommendation, receives 12 years. The courtroom receives the sentence in the particular silence of a room in which justice has just been done and everyone present knows it. Then sound returns, not celebration, not quite, but the release of breath and the shift of bodies and the beginning of the murmured processing that fills spaces after verdicts are read. Adiz sits completely still through all of it. She holds her cane in both hands on her lap and she hears the words, 25 years, no parole for the first 15. And she feels something move through her that she does not immediately have a name for. It is not triumph. It is not relief in the simple sense. It is something closer to the specific settling that happens when a thing has been seen and named and held accountable and the record now says the truth. Not her truth against his. The truth. Permanent, documented, adjudicated by a system she had demanded perform its function and that had, this time, performed it. She does not look at Bayo when they take him out. She had looked at him every day of the trial, directly, without deflection, with the same attention she had once given him when she believed he deserved it. And she had watched him understand, incrementally over those days, that the woman he had spent 14 months constructing himself to deceive was not broken and was not afraid and was not going to grant him the mercy of looking away. She had given him that much. She is done giving him anything. Outside the courthouse, in the thick Lagos afternoon, the air is warm and close in the way it gets when the harmattan has not yet arrived and the city is still carrying its own heat. Adi's mother holds her for a long time in the kind of silence that does not need words because the words are all inside the hold. Ngozi stands beside them with her arms folded and her face doing several things at once. Relief and fury and love all present simultaneously, the face of a woman who has been in a corner of rooms that cost her friend everything for 4 months and is now standing in the sun. Amara shakes Adi's hand with both of hers. She does this for every client at the end of a case that required something real from them, and she means it every time, but she holds Adi's hand a moment longer than standard, and what passes between them in that moment does not require language. Toby is waiting by the car. He has been careful throughout. Present when presence was useful, absent when it was not, never inserting himself into spaces that were not his to occupy. He had done what he could do. The investigator, the CCTV, the attorney referral, the calls that open the right doors at the right time. He had handed all of it to the appropriate systems and stepped back and let those systems do what they exist to do. He understands the difference between being useful and taking over, and he had held that distinction carefully from the beginning because Adiz is a woman who has already had one man decide what her life should look like without asking her, and he would not be another version of that in any form. Adiz walks to where he is standing. She is steadier on the cane now. The physical recovery has been long and disciplined, and she has approached it with the same methodical focus she brings to everything. She says, "I want to thank you properly. Not in a hospital corridor. Not in passing. Properly." He says, "You do not owe me anything." She says, "I know I do not owe you anything. I want to thank you. There is a difference between obligation and intention, and I am choosing intention. Let me do this." He is quiet for a moment. Then he says, "Then let me take you and your mother to lunch. Nothing formal. Nothing complicated. Just food and some air." She considers him. This man who had been at the wrong place at the right time, who had stayed when nobody required him to stay, who had moved with resources and with restraint and had never once made her situation a story about himself. She thinks about the word he said to her in Igbo on the pavement when she was barely conscious. She thinks about the folder placed quietly on a hospital table without performance. She thinks about a man sitting in the back of a courtroom every few days just to be present without being asked. She says, "Yes, that is something I can do." Her daughter's name is Chisholm Adiz Okonkwo. Adiz had given her the Okonkwo name, her father's name, her own name, and nothing of Bayo's, because Chisholm will know exactly who she comes from and it will not be him. She is 4 months old at the lunch, small and serious and thriving, with her mother's wide dark eyes and a quality of attentiveness that the pediatrician describes with slight amusement as unusual for her age. Adiz brings her. Toby holds her for approximately 3 minutes, carefully, correctly, with the posture of a man who respects what he is holding. Chisholm examines his face with the frank assessment of a 4-month-old who has not yet learned to be polite about staring. She reaches out and touches his jaw with one small hand. He goes very still. Then she makes a sound, not quite a word, but clearly an opinion, and clearly a positive one. Adiz's mother, watching this, says something in Igbo that makes Toby laugh. A full, unguarded laugh, his head tilting back, completely caught before he can compose himself for it. Adiz watches him laugh and files the image in the part of herself that is still learning, carefully and without hurry, what it feels like to read a person and trust the reading. She is not ready for anything beyond this lunch. She knows this about herself precisely. There is work still to be done inside her. Not dramatic work, not crisis, just the quiet, patient work of a person relearning her own instincts after they were deliberately manipulated by someone who had studied them. That work takes time, and she will give it time. But she is here. She is alive. Her daughter is in the arms of a man who ran toward her when the world threw her off a balcony on Christmas Eve, and the man who threw her is in a cell in Kirikiri where Justice Boma's sentence will hold him for the next 25 years, and the record says the truth, and the truth is permanent. Adiz Okonkwo had not asked for any of this. She had not asked to be betrayed by the person she trusted most deeply. She had not asked to fall 8 stories on Christmas Eve. She had not asked for a billionaire to be standing in exactly the right place at exactly the right moment with exactly the resources and the instinct to do what needed to be done. Life had handed her all of it without consultation. What she had done was survive it. Then she had stood up, walked into a courtroom on a cane, and made sure that the truth was spoken aloud by someone with the authority to make it permanent. That is not revenge. Revenge is about the other person. What Adiz did is about herself, about the refusal to let what was done to her be the last word on who she is and what she is worth. She is worth everything. She has always been worth everything. And she is just beginning. Subscribe to African Tales by Amarachi right now. Share this story with every woman who needs to know that survival is just the beginning. And drop a comment telling us what moment in Adiz's story hit you the hardest. We read every single one. Welcome to the family.